Welcome to America's Cannabis Conversation. Heard every Saturday at 4:20 p.m. online at americascannabisconversation.com. Each week, we provide our listeners information, education, and insight into the exploding medical and adult use cannabis industry. You'll hear from industry experts, elected officials, local growers, detractors, and more. Learn how to build your own cannabis business, how to grow the product, what's legal, and where it's legal. Tune in each week to hear the latest industry news and updates from the American Cannabis Industry Association in Washington, tips on investing in cannabis, personal success stories, and more. It's time to join the conversation. And here's your host, Dan Perkins.
This is Dan Perkins, and now for your 2 minutes and 30 seconds quick cannabis news. New York City. Bank of New York Mellon may have impacted the chances of the SAFE banking bill passing the Senate by telling cannabis industry customers they will no longer take deposits after November 30th. Denver, Colorado. Because of the hard freeze, as much as 50% of the outdoor cannabis crop may have been lost. The results of this cold wave will diminish supply, and the chances of prices going higher are realistic. Another early snowstorm is expected this weekend, which could further reduce the harvest. Golden, Colorado. A Coors subsidiary is start carrying non-alcoholic CBD beverages, citing increased demand for non-alcoholic beverages. A Coors distributor in Denver has started carrying 2 brands of non-alcoholic drinks infused with hemp extracts, including CBD. On to Washington, D.C. Retail sales of CBD may increase by 133% in 2019 over 2018. The recent surge of consumer demand for CBD, coupled with increasingly easy access to CBD products, is expected to drive retail sales to about $1.1 billion to $1.3 billion in 2019. Sacramento, California. Among the recent marijuana-related bills signed into law by California Governor Gavin Newsom is a measure that will allow some cannabis businesses in the state, those filing taxes as sole proprietorship or partnerships, to deduct operating expenses on their state tax return. The nation's capital, nearly 800 cannabis business leaders and policy experts, led by the National Cannabis Industry Association, are calling on Congress to remove marijuana from the Federal Controlled Substance Act as the vaping crisis continues. The recent illnesses are unmistakably a reminder of the importance of effective regulation, the association sent in letters to Congress. Denver, Colorado. Andy Williams, the CEO and co-founder of Medicine Man Technologies, said in a news release that Canyon had been on our radar for several years. Medicine Man Technologies has been on a buying spree this year. Earlier this week, it announced it will pay $31 million for a Colorado company, Strawberry Fields. And finally, in Denver, Colorado, former IRS attorney warns of upcoming tsunami of marijuana-related 280E audits. A tax expert who spent 6 years as an IRS trial lawyer is sounding a new 280E alarm bell that many cannabis businesses might need to answer soon. This has been your 2.5 minutes quick cannabis news. Joining us on the program today is a pharmacist from London, England, who has created a 12-point checklist to guide consumers in buying CBD products either online or in a store. And our second guest is an inventor who's developed a mechanical weed trimming device that is 15 times faster than hand trimming and recovers its cost in months, not years. This is Dan Perkins. Welcome to the conversation. This is Dan Perkins, and we have an international guest with us today, Jibril Farah. And he is from England. He's a pharmacist in England. I saw him on YouTube where he's got a YouTube video, which we'll talk about in a little bit, that's gotten hundreds of thousands of views. It's a very important video about what to look for when you're buying CBD oil. So, Jibril, thank you for joining us. And spend a moment, if you would, telling us about you.
Hi, Dan. Thanks for having me on your show. I'm very, very excited. As you said, my name is Jibril Farah. I'm a pharmacist based in London, in England. And I first kind of became aware of cannabis as a medicinal substance. A few years ago, when I was working in the community, and a drug came out for patients with multiple sclerosis based on cannabis. And that's when I kind of started looking into it. And then 2 years ago, when I started my YouTube channel, I noticed there was a lot of, videos were getting a lot of views on the subject, and there weren't many videos. So it was clearly an area where people were really, really interested in, and there was not a lot of information. So I thought I would touch on some of the angles of the topic, and it kind of blew up, got a lot of views. So I kind of made more videos, became more interested. And that coincided with the kind of explosion in CBD and hemp shops and just everywhere these days. So, it kind of snowballed over the last 2 years. So that's how I became involved, yeah.
As you know, in the United States, if you're buying cannabis, the drug, you have to buy it through a licensed dispensary. If you're buying CBD product, you buy it anywhere. Is that the same thing true in London?
Yes, provided your CBD has less than 0.2% of THC. THC is the psychoactive substance in cannabis. Provided it has less than 0.2%, you can buy it anywhere. You can buy it in supermarkets, pharmacies, petrol stations. But if it's got more than 0.2%, then it's classified as a controlled drug, and without a license, you can get in trouble for having it.
So are the dispensaries that dispense cannabis, are they government or are they private?
They're private. So there's, their chains. The biggest one, Boots, is actually owned by one of your giant organizations, Walgreens.
Sure.
So they're not government owned. If you want prescription strength CBD, then you'll have to see a physician and get it through that. But if you just want normal CBD with very low levels of THC, then you can buy it anywhere. The quality is really variable.
So that the Boots stores, which I love when I go to London because they have everything I ever wanted, they can dispense medical grade marijuana.
Yeah, medical grade, you need a prescription.
I understand that, but you need it. But unlike the United States, our Walgreens and CVS and Rite Aid and all that, they can't dispense. They have to be separately licensed dispensaries. But maybe that'll change. So, how widespread is both our cannabis and legal cannabis and CBD oils used in England?
It's huge now. It's huge. I mean, where I live, literally just in the last 2 months, 2 new shops have opened called Vape. They market themselves as vape shops, but they actually sell kind of CBD and hemp and that kind of stuff. So it's absolutely everywhere in the high streets, online, and in Europe. If you live in England and you really want 100% genuine, cannabis with full THC, full CBD, all you have to do is go on a flight for 45 minutes and get to Amsterdam in Holland, and over there you can buy any grade of CBD or cannabis completely legal.
Now, is there any push in England or Scotland or Wales or Ireland to make what we call adult use cannabis, meaning anybody can buy it without a prescription? Any movement for that in England?
Yeah, there's movement. There's movement for that, but the MHRA, who are kind of the equivalent of the FDA, the people who license drugs, the government arm which licenses drug, they will never allow that, because they will just say you have to do the clinical trials, you have to do the studies, you have to do the research and development, possibly spending hundreds of millions of dollars, spend maybe 10 years, and then if you prove your product is safe and effective, they'll give you a license. Obviously, a small shop on the high street is not going to spend hundreds of millions of pounds or dollars. They spend 10 years researching the product before they put it on their shelf. So I think if you have the same problem in the US, you have the FDA, which is the federal arm, the licensing authorities. They've already licensed 4 drugs, 4 CBD-based drugs. And those companies have spent hundreds of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars. They've spent 10, 15 years developing the drug. Then they got the license from the FDA. So if they saw the FDA giving free licenses to kind of shops and online websites to sell CBD, they're not going to be very happy, because they'll say, why have you made us go through 15 years of studying CBD and spending all this money if you're just going to give the license away? So that's the huge point. That's why I think legalizing CBD is not going to happen very easily.
Okay, so you're a pharmacist in London?
Yeah, I am. Yeah.
And does your pharmacy sell CBD oil?
I actually work in a GP surgery, which is a family doctor's practice. I don't work in community pharmacies anymore. But there's a couple of pharmacies near me which sell CBD, so I can literally walk over there during my lunch break and get a bottle.
Why do you think the people in London specifically that you know of, why are they buying the CBD oils there?
People with chronic conditions. I'm also in a couple of Facebook groups where people discuss this, and my observation is these are people with really long-term, serious chronic conditions like cancer, arthritis, severe pain. People who have kind of tried pretty much the whole list of conventional medicines, and they just want something that works.
Yeah.
And this is why they move on to, trying cannabis, because they just want something that works. We all love a magic bullet.
So in the United States, a lot of people, when they started in this business, thought that the cannabis business buyer was going to be between 21 and 35. What we're finding out now that the typical cannabis buyer is north of age 55. What do you see in your country?
Absolutely. I would say 55 sounds about right, because the ones I see are people kind of in their kind of mid-40s onwards, all the way to kind of 70s and 80s, people with serious long-term chronic conditions who just want something that works for their condition. They've tried all the prescription medicines, they've seen their doctor, they've seen consultants, they've been around that block, and they just want something that works. I mean, you can't really blame them, because they just want to get better. They just want to have less pain.
Yes.
So it's completely understandable.
Right. We're speaking with Jibril Farah, who is a pharmacist in London, now in a family practice, I think you said.
Yeah, in a GP. We call it a GP practice. I think you call it family doctors over there. Kind of do their medicines management.
Thank you. The reason why he's on the show is because he has a fabulous YouTube video, and we'll get that for you in just a moment. But he's really provided tremendous service CBD oil, and I'd like you to take a few moments and just quickly run through them for our audience, because they're so important.
Okay. I'm sure you're going to put the video somewhere on your website, the link to the video.
I will.
So the first one I would say people need to look at is the origin of the hemp. You really need to go for organic hemp for obvious reasons. You want something, this is going to go in your body. You want something grown using, good farming practices that will have all the naturalness, if you like. So go for, organic hemp. That's number one. Number two is you have to be very careful with the THC levels. So as we said, THC is the psychoactive ingredient. You really want that to be as low as possible, preferably below 0.3%. Otherwise, you can get into some legal difficulties. Number three is additives. So just look at the label before you buy it. Is there a huge list of additives with long chemical names that you don't really understand? It's best to stay away from, because CBD is kind of a naturally stable product. You don't need to add a million additives just to get it to be stable. So avoid anything with a long list of additives. Number four is lab. This is the most important one. If you forget all the points, remember this one. Get a lab report. So every time you buy a CBD product, ask the vendor for a lab report. If they give you a lab report, check the lab report. Does it apply to your bottle, to your batch? So the batch on the lab report should match the batch number on your bottle. If it doesn't, because these are some of the tricks manufacturers pull when you ask them for a lab report, they give you a sample lab report from another batch that they've probably done, say, a year ago or 2 years ago. And the person looks at it and thinks, oh, yeah, I've got a lab report. You have a lab report, but it doesn't apply to your bottle. And number five, try and go for something called full spectrum, which means that as well as the CBD and possibly low-level THC, your product has some of the other beneficial compounds in cannabis, because cannabis has hundreds of compounds, one of them called terpenes and so on. Do you want me to crack on, or do you want to...
Keep on going. Keep on going, please.
Okay. Number six is poor labeling. So, as you know, me and you can set up a CBD shop tomorrow morning. We just need to get ingredients, which you can get in bulk, and just fill it in a bottle, add oil, and put it on the shelf. So, if you see poor labeling, that means this is a kind of a shed organization. They don't really know what they're doing. It's a shoddy operation, and you really need to avoid them. And number seven is the variety. So if you go on a website selling CBD and you just see them selling just the oil, just one variety. They're not selling kind of gummies and drops or creams or topicals. That means they've just set up this just to make a quick buck and just get out. So you want to see a website that's is selling varieties. That means the people who own the website, they're committed to CBD. They want to be here long term. So go for website selling or shop selling a variety of CBD products. Number 8 is the website. So if you go on the website can tell you a lot about the professionalism and the seriousness of the people who own the business. So if you go to a website and there's no educational material, there's no blog, they don't have a frequently asked questions page, they don't have it just doesn't look professional, then if the website is not professional, 9 times out of 10, the product is not professional, not quite poor, most likely anyway. Number 9 is the About Us page. So there's no excuse for not having an About Us page. This tells you about the people who own the business, their backstory, their vision, their kind of mission statement. Frequently, a lot of small organizations who just there quick to make a quick buck, they forget to put an About Us page. That's a big sign to avoid that kind of organization. Number 10 is send a test email. So what I do is you can do this when you're buying anything online. You send the customer service contact email, which you can find on the website, a quick email, just ask them anything random about the price, any discounts, returns policy, and you just want to gauge how quickly they get back to you and if they get back to you. If they take a week to get back to you, that's a really bad sign, because then if something goes wrong with your product and you want to return it or exchange it or something, that means you will never be able to get hold of them. So avoid them and move on. Number 11 is the reviews. Now this is a tricky one. So if you go on the manufacturers' websites, like the brands' websites, they will have ridiculous reviews, like 15,000 reviews, all of them 5 stars. So I would say ignore any reviews on the company's website. What you want to do is go into Google and type the brand's name into the search box and see what kind of reviews come up. If you see consistently lots of bad reviews and horror stories, then they best be avoided. And what makes looking for reviews a little bit more difficult is that Amazon, they don't really sell that much CBD. And Amazon really are really good at kind of managing reviews. Their reviews are really reliable, but unfortunately there's not many CBD brands on Amazon. And finally, health benefit claims. So if you go to a website selling CBD and you see a statement saying our product has been shown to cure X, Y, and Z, just don't even click on the second page. Just run a mile and don't turn around. Because CBD there's a disclaimer that you see on all websites at the bottom of the homepage saying that these products have not been proven by the FDA, not been licensed, blah blah blah. That shows the people that own the website, they know the law, they understand the products, they've read the law, and they can be trusted. So I would say any health benefit claims, run away.
So we're going to put your video on our website, but if they can't wait, How can they get to it? What is the URL for your website, your YouTube video?
YouTube video, if you just type on the YouTube CBD scams, if you type that, it's one of the first videos that will come up, and my channel is called The Original Pharmacist.
Okay. Talking with Jibril Farah, a pharmacist from London who's been talking about points that we should consider in selecting a CBD oil product. You told me in a pre-show that there was a significant event that happened around March, around, was it CBD oil or cannabis?
Both.
Okay.
CBD, THC. I don't know if you know, but CBD itself became legal in the UK only in like a few months ago, and something happened that actually almost forced the government to basically legalize this, which is that there was a mum with a young child that had a very severe form of epilepsy, and the child was having up to 300 epilepsy attacks per day, so their quality of life was pretty much nil. And the mum has tried all the kind of different medicines from the pediatric consultants, and nothing was working. So she said, I want to try cannabis, of course, cannabis at the time was completely illegal in the UK in all forms. So she went to Holland, which is just across the water from here, where cannabis, medicinal cannabis is legal, and she got her prescription filled by a specialist in Holland, and she brought it back to the UK. And upon landing in the UK, she found basically an army of police waiting for her, and she was arrested. And they've confiscated all her CBD medicinal cannabis. And this, by the way, cost her £4,000, which is $5,000 US, and she's not a wealthy person by kind of any stretch of the imagination. So this was a lot of money for her that she actually got through crowdfunding online. So obviously she was devastated, and she reached out to her local member of parliament, and the press was there, and she kicked up a big fuss. And this is how the government was forced to change the law and basically legalize cannabis, so that that child can use this medicine, to make her better, a medicine that was actually shown to help her. And I believe now she's a lot better. I mean, her level of attacks have reduced to maybe 1 or 2 a week from 300 per day.
Wow. So just make sure I understand what you said. They create a specific law for this one child, or did it change for everybody?
Yeah, they changed the law in terms of that you can have medicinal cannabis, any form of medicinal cannabis, prescribed and basically handed, because before in the UK you couldn't even if a doctor gave you a prescription for medicinal cannabis, you couldn't take it to a pharmacy.
So this was in March. All of a sudden, the government decides that they're going to make medical cannabis legal.
Yeah.
But there wasn't a delivery system to deliver it. So what happened? We call them dispensaries here in the States, but who was the first to start offering medicinal cannabis?
Believe it or not, as ridiculous as this might sound, the prescription gets made up, the prescription gets written in the UK, but they actually have to ship it over from Holland. So literally, a dispensary in Holland fills a prescription, and then it gets shipped over to the patient in the UK.
Wow.
So the prescription might start, say, $10, but by the time you've added delivery cost, the travel, the customs, everything, it might just completely blow up and be about $100.
Wow.
So it's kind of a surreal situation. It doesn't make any sense, but this is the only way that you can get medicinal cannabis to patients in the UK. Yeah.
Now, is there any discussion about creating medical marijuana dispensaries like we have in the States, where the dispensaries can actually grow the cannabis, harvest it, and prepare it for drugs?
There's not a discussion yet, because the law itself changed so recently, so we kind of chewing on that still. We haven't really become comfortable with it yet. So maybe in a year or two, then when more people are using it, more doctors are prescribing it. The other problem is that doctors are very, very nervous about prescribing medicinal cannabis here, because it doesn't have a license. So if a doctor prescribes it, it would be on an unlicensed basis. And if something happens to that patient, then the doctor will probably get shafted in the courts.
Wow.
So doctors are very, very nervous about prescribing it. So the volume of patients who are being prescribed medicinal cannabis is still very, very small.
Yeah.
So I don't think any of the big chemist chains will set up a dedicated dispensary just for 1 or 2 patients.
So we're speaking with Jibril Farah concerning what's happening with cannabis in England. If you missed any of this interview, which has been fascinating, you can go back to America's Cannabis Conversation, and you can listen to this and the other appearance that Jibril had. But it's amazing what you're saying is that they have to send the prescription to Holland to be filled.
Yeah. There was a case of a young lady in a town called Brighton, who I think she was the first person to have a medicinal cannabis prescription filled in the UK. And when the prescription arrived from Holland, she had an entire TV crew in her house just to film the kind of momentous moments where she became the first person. So it's still very, very new here. People are still kind of coming to grips with it and kind of trying to understand it.
Jibril, I happened to have the opportunity, a great opportunity, a couple of weeks ago to interview a researcher who is studying cannabis as a treatment for pancreatic cancer. And
Wow,
he told me in the show that they have been able to kill the tumors of pancreatic cancer with this strain of cannabis. And what's amazing for our audience who may not know much about pancreatic cancer, it will soon be the second largest cancer killer in our country. But if you have pancreatic cancer, you're eventually going to wind up with liver cancer and lung cancer and brain cancer and other cancers. And the protocol went out of the pancreas and went in and started to kill the cancer in other parts of the body. So they're starting full blown U.S. FDA clinical trials in January.
Yeah.
So Jibril, I want to thank you for the time. How can people get in touch with you? How can they follow you and what you're doing?
YouTube video. If you just type on the YouTube CBD scams, if you type that, it's one of the first videos that will come up. And my channel is called The Original Pharmacist.
Well, thank you, Jibril, for being part of the conversation today. And as I said earlier, ladies and gentlemen, if you missed the first part of this interview or any part of the interview or the previous one, you can go to americascannabisconversation.com and find previous episodes and listen to his fascinating story on 12 things to do about picking the right CBD product. Jibril, thank you so much for joining us today.
No problem. Yes, I really enjoyed it. I hope people find it useful.
Thank you. This is Dan Perkins, your host and co-creator of America's Cannabis Conversation. We promise to do our best to bring you a high-value, entertaining program. We want from you what you want from your customers. Come back for more. And now, let's meet our guest. It's Saturday afternoon, and this is America's Cannabis Conversation. And as we promised you, we were going to bring you lots of different things in the cannabis industry. And we're thrilled to have Ryan Hall with us today from Shearline to talk about an amazing piece of technology that he has that I've never seen before that's going to make your growing and harvesting much more productive. So, Ryan, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Dan. I appreciate it. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah. You've been in this business, I think, over 25 years, did you tell me?
Oh, longer than I'm going to admit to.
Okay. So what happened that got you in this business?
Well, that's going back quite a ways, but I think what you might be referring to is the automated trimmers, marijuana trimming machines.
Yes. Yes.
So what happened there was I've always been an inventor. I've always built custom motorcycles, boats, airplanes. I've been an engineer since 26, and so I've been doing this kind of stuff for a long time. I've also had a little bit of a hand in the marijuana industry at times, and I had friends who were doing this, and all of them were constantly complaining about trying to hire trimmers, hand trimmers, the length of time it took. And so I figured there had to be a way to come up with some sort of a machine that could do this. There always seems to be a way to do that. So I spent about three and a half years trying to come up with a way to trim marijuana with a piece of equipment. And luckily at the time I was here in BC, which was a fairly liberal place to be. And so I had an opportunity to actually test my machine as I went along and come up with different ideas. I wound up alienating an awful lot of friends who got tired of their buds being torn to shreds by my latest idea, to the point where most of them were hiding from me after a while, because nobody believed it could happen anyway, right? This was like nobody thought you could trim marijuana by hand. It didn't make any sense. So finally, I hit something that seemed to be working, and I sent it out to get it tested, and my buddy that took it had already tried a number of things of mine and come back and said, man, it just tore everything up, Ryan. So now when he took this machine, he never showed back up. And I thought, what's going on? Finally calls me, tells me, hey, that's working really good. I want 3 more. And that's what kind of started it all. And so I started producing these machines and selling them off to people in the area. And pretty much it all was right here in British Columbia. There wasn't any trimming machines down in the States at that time. It was about 2 years before people actually started copying my concept, even up here. And then it got out, and as now you can tell, there's literally hundreds of companies making trimmers of one sort or another.
We're speaking, ladies and gentlemen, with Ryan Hall, who is the founder of Shearline Trimmer. It seems to me, as we look at the marijuana business, both in Canada and the United States, what I would call the retail, it's growing by leaps and bounds. And I would think that the demands for trimming machines would be big as growers have to expand their crops in order to be able to service. But this is really a very innovative idea to replace. I saw one of your videos where it was how fast your one machine could compete against 15 trimmers in a contest. And tell our growers the results of that test.
Well, actually, I think you're referring to one of my competitors. And so without getting into very negative kind of conversations here, let me clear a little something up before we get to this. Is that okay?
We want truth and we want good advice.
Okay. So first of all, when I first formed a company to produce marijuana trimmers, I called myself Centurion. So the company was Centurion for 18 years. And about 5 years ago, a guy came to me and said he wanted to buy all kinds of machines and he wanted to be the worldwide distributor for Centurion. I didn't know the man. I didn't know any history of him. I didn't know who he really was. But, you always entertain big talks like that. You never know what they're going to turn out to be. Well, in the end, it turned out that he was a bit of a total scam artist, a local gangster type guy who managed to get some machines from me, but after a while we realized how dangerous he was to deal with, and we insisted on stopping selling machines to him. And so he started selling my machines out there and telling people he invented them. This is a very well-known story up here, and it's known in quite a few other places. So one of the bad mistakes I made when dealing with this guy, because on the internet you can just say whatever you want, right? And people most of the time believe it. So this guy was telling people we were partners, we were ex-friends, we had a falling out, all kinds of stuff. None of this was true. But he was clever enough, or at least his lawyer cousin was clever enough to realize we never trademarked the name down in the United States. So he went down and trademarked it. And the next thing I know, I'm getting sued to stop using the name we've had for 18 years. Well, if anybody's dealt with matters like this in court, you realize we were looking at a 2-year struggle, a couple $100,000 minimum to simply retain the name. And during that period of time, during the court battle, he would be able to continue to use the name. Nothing we could do about it after he'd already got a trademark, because the trademark industry or the trademark administration down there had failed to find that we'd been around for 18 years, so they gave it to him. So that video that you saw, more than likely anyway, was a Centurion Pro video instead of a Shearline video. It's confusing because he actually steals all the videos that I make and puts them on his website. If you go to his website, you can look at my how-to videos and go to his website. You'll see those are my machines, my videos. It's insane. We've been battling with this guy for 5 years. However, that video that you're particularly speaking about was actually done with one of my machines. Is it the one where all the guys are dressed up in white? Okay. So that was done when him and I had first met each other, and he had arranged for some friend of his to do a video like this. And that was actually one of my machines that we produce. And so that is an accurate video. And so to get off of the point of this guy and onto the point of what the machines can accomplish, it's going to vary an awful lot. There's a lot of claims out there right now from different companies about they love this pounds per hour. And everybody needs to be very careful about reading that and thinking to themselves, well, this machine will do only 100 pounds an hour, or this machine will do 10 pounds an hour, this machine will do 1,600 pounds an hour. These are unbelievably exaggerated claims, and it's almost impossible to make something like this. Anybody that's been around marijuana knows that it varies greatly. The strains vary. How you grew at that particular time can vary. The density, the structure of the leaf, how much leaf there is on it, it varies enormously. And these machines are going to only be able to produce what they're capable of running through the machine and actually getting finished as it goes through. You'll also hear these exaggerated numbers, and they're basically based on them cramming the stuff through it as fast as possible and then saying, and a little bit of touch-up is necessary. Well, it's a lot of touch-up. So you buy a machine so that people don't have to do that, and yet you got 6 or 7 or 10 people sitting around touching up the buds the machine did. If you watch my videos, you'll see very accurate, very honestly portrayed videos of what it looks like going into the machine and what it looks like coming out of the machine.
One of the things that you and I talked about is you're going to make available to us to put on our website an appropriate video. But in the 3 minutes or so we have left, I would like you to perform a public service, if you would. We have a lot of people getting into the cannabis business who have no experience, and this is an important piece of machinery. As people are looking at a potential trimmer, what advice would you give to them of make sure that you ask these questions or look at the machine? What advice can you give to people?
It's tricky. I wish I could give you specific advice, but here's the best I can give you. Call the companies up. See what it's actually like to deal with the person. See if the person that you're talking to actually sounds knowledgeable and it isn't just bull. Do your own research. Don't just look at what they say on their website and believe it, because it's just almost guaranteed to be not accurate. Any of the larger companies that have been out there trying to purchase these for themselves, the big publicly traded companies we have now, have discovered that the claims are so exaggerated. And there's all kinds of fighting and suits going on about this already. So do your due diligence. Check out not only the company's products, take a look at their videos, and watch to make sure that you're seeing a video where you can tell that the product that's going into the machine is coming out, not a video that shows the machine running and doesn't do any good close-ups of it coming out in any kind of amounts, or maybe just shows you a picture of buds that they say the machine trimmed. You got to be careful. I hate to say it, but a lot of these companies are just being disingenuous about showing what their product can do. So there's the number one thing. Do your own research. There's a lot of forums out there that talk about which companies are safe to deal with and seem to be honest and give good service, and you should take your time. This is an expensive investment, and not only is it an expensive investment, but you're counting on this at that point to do a crop that you probably spent months and months working on. So you get this machine, you're counting on it to get through, you haven't set up all the hand trimmers you might have done before, and suddenly the machine doesn't come close to performing like you hoped. And you're in a bind. And I have seen and talked to many people have lost the majority of their crops simply because of this. So be smart. Do your own due diligence. Check out these companies. Check out the people involved. Read the forums on what people think about them. Be careful about these ads that talk about the best trimmers. If you go to a website and you see something say the best trimmer in the world, find out if that company is selling those trimmers. If you scroll down and all the trimmers that they tell you are the best trimmers, they're offering you at a reduced rate, question their genuine, concern about this, just like you would with anything.
How can people see your machines and get a hold of you?
Well, it's really easy. Just go to Shearline.com, Shearline, one word, and the website there will give you all kinds of information. There's how-to videos, and there's a toll-free number. You dial that toll-free number and you can call me. You'll almost always get me, and I'll spend time with you answering your questions. We guide you through every aspect of it, from harvest, from how you harvest, from how you dry, all the way through to operation of the machines.
So this is Dan Perkins. We've been interviewing and talking with Ryan Hall of Shearline.com with an amazing piece of equipment. You told me how quickly a customer who runs a clean shop and the machine to its proper capacity, how quickly they could recover their costs. Would you tell us that story real quick?
Yeah, the ROI, something all companies love to hear. On the average, you're going to expect to get a big piece of equipment return on investment in 2-3 years. A very unusual thing in an industry is to get returned within a year. My equipment, when used properly, is going to give you a return on investment within 30, 40, 50 hours of operation for our original model, maybe less. That's the entire package is going to pay itself back that quick. When you move up to the more commercial models, it might take just a little bit longer, but it's still going to happen very quickly within months. If you're doing 100 pounds with a 2x2 or 200 pounds or 300 pounds, it's only going to take you a couple of crops before you've returned your investment on that. So it's one of those rare things in the world. With the equipment, if it's in really high quality like ours, it's going to last you many, many years of operation with minimal maintenance. So it's a great investment for the people out there trying to get into the industry. In fact, it's an investment you simply have to make.
So when you're considering, when a person is considering and wants to start a grow farm and they're looking at harvesting, and in the past it was hand trimmers, the reason why this thing pays back so quickly is the labor cost savings. Is that the bottom line?
It's part of it. It's just part of it. There's a number of other things that come into play. For instance, if you're an outdoor grower, you're subject to a very limited period of time, depending on what state you're in and where your climate zone is. You're subject to a very limited period of time where you have to cut that harvest down, bring it in, and either get it trimmed or get it hanging. And then so there's a lot of options. It's wet trimming or dry trimming. If you're going to wet trim, you got to have a whole bunch of people hand trimming, or you got to have a whole bunch of machines, because you've got to get that product out of the fields and hanging and drying so that it doesn't rot, so you don't start getting molds and all sorts of problems. So the fact with good, proper equipment, trimming equipment, is you can get your outdoor harvest in much quicker. If you're an indoor grower, well, you've still got the issues of every time that all these crops are timed to within days of when they're harvested, have to be taken out of the room, and then the room refilled again. So you have these very short periods of time where you have to pull the room down, trim all of the stuff and get it put up, and then you have to be able to immediately take the clones you've got prepared or the vegetative growth plants and put them back into that room. So if you're trying to do that by hand, as all of these larger companies are discovering now, many of them went into it hoping they were going to hand trim so they could make the claim they were all hand trimmed. And they're discovering it's just not possible. And so they're coming to me, and we're putting good machines in their places, and it's making a huge difference for them.
So we're talking with Ryan Hall from Shearline. I got to ask you this question. I've seen your videos, and I see the trimming process, and we have that on the website. So if you're interested in Ryan's equipment, you can go see it on our website. But I have to ask this question, Ryan. When you put those buds through there and you trim off all of that leaf and everything else, what happens to that?
To the trim?
Yeah.
Oh, it used to be people would take it in giant garbage bags and take it to the dump. That was years ago. Now, with the advent of people making extracts and edibles, all of that trim, if it's properly collected, is very valuable. They use it for extracts, for extracting oils, for pressing, for all sorts of processes. And so in order to save that, most machines use a big blower with a 3,600 RPM impeller to pull suction through and pull the leaves down through the slots in whatever format of a machine they have so that it can trim those leaves good. Well, when those leaves go through that super fast-moving steel impeller, aluminum impeller, they're getting mashed up. And the extract companies are finding that that's very difficult for them, no matter what process they're using, to get good, clean extract oils out of. So we have separators, old technology. I didn't invent this. Cyclonic separators is used in many, many industries. It's a very unique process that spins the material and drops it down into a stainless or an epoxy-lined barrel, and it doesn't allow it to go through the impeller. The impeller is on the opposite side of this piece of equipment. So all of the trim then is very, very valuable. One of the tricks they're learning is as you're pulling this through, people get what they call keef. It's not actually keef. That's a different thing. But it's very fine powder. And this fine powder has a much higher percentage of oils than the leaf would. And so the companies love to buy that as powder. And so we also have a process that we teach our customers of how to separate the trim from the keef. So you might get $300 a pound for the trim, but you're probably going to get more like $800-900 a pound for the keef. So it's all ways of just getting the best out of your harvest. And we have ways of making it way more than just the flour now. There's a lot to it. I'm finding even the hemp farmers who are going to grind up all of their buds and make it into oil are still buying my machines because they've discovered that for the process they use, trying to run the massive amount of bulk of all the fan leaves and the other bigger leaves, it's not worth it for them. They're not extracting enough oil, so they want to take most of that off. They're not looking for a hand-trimmed looking bud. They're just looking to get rid of the bulk. And my machines can be set so they can do that.
So we're speaking with Ryan Hall, the founder of Shearline trimming machines. So does that same thing happen, even though it doesn't go through this trimming machines? And I noticed that you also talk about machines that help strip the cannabis off the stalks. Are the stalks of any value?
Yeah, that's a real important thing. It's the last bottleneck that we had to overcome. And we still haven't got it overcome as well as I'd like to. I'm still working. I've been working on it for years. But there's a couple of different kinds of what we call buckers. Some people call de-stemmers, deboners, all kinds of names for it. But the basic idea is that before you can put buds into a machine, they need to be cut off of the main stalk down to the lowest common denominator. If you put a bud in and there's a little piece of stalk and another bud, it'll get trimmed, but that stock will still be there. And you can't market it. You can't sell it like that. So you have to take these buds off. So there's two kinds of buckers out there. There's the one that's been around for quite a long time, and it basically has two rubber wheels that are close together, and they're on the opposite side of a steel plate with a hole in it. This is simplifying it, but it's basically all it is. You put the base of the stock in through the hole, the rubber wheels grab the stock and jerk the plant through the hole real fast, stripping it down. Well, I think most people can picture what that does to a lot of the buds. In dry trimming, it's terrible. In wet trimming, it could work a little, but you're still going to lose the base off of quite a few of your big buds. You're going to crush up some of your little buds. I've seen them all, and no matter what, they all have problems. I designed a piece about 2 years ago that's been out there for a while, and it cuts. So it has a blade out of carbide steel that spins underneath a plate with a slot in it, very, very close, 1/8 inch. And so it takes a little practice. It's a tool. It's like trying to run a bandsaw or a table saw or anything else. Your operator has to practice for a little bit. But once they get good at it, they can buck as fast as at least 4 people and without doing any damage whatsoever. It also has the added advantage of all of that stock that would normally be making a giant bird's nest pile in your place gets chopped up into tiny, tiny little pieces and dropped into a bag under the bucker. So it also helps with your cleanup. And we actually have one cool little hippie chick that uses all that chopped up stuff after it's been dried and sells it in bags for people who want to put it on their smokers for meats and fish. Hilarious.
Yeah. So we got a little over 2 minutes left. I want to move to the dramatic expansion and how people from big corporations are contacting you. We see recent reports where big companies are spending billions of dollars to buying growing fields. And I wonder if these people have the expertise to run these farms, or are they looking for people like you to help them in various processes? So can you talk a little bit about how the expansion is affecting your business?
I've got quite a bit of experience with them now. I've been dealing with some of the bigger companies for a while. Honestly, I find them a little difficult to deal with. Big corporations have so many checks and balances and all kinds of things they got to go through that it's sort of hard to get them. Some of them out there are getting better and better. I've got a few of them that are actually producing pretty nice stuff. But when you move to this scale that they're trying to do, we're talking about companies trying to produce thousands of kilos at a time. They're discovering that it's not as easy as they think. Some of them had tried to bring in old school growers who are great when they're at certain quantities and trying to produce certain amounts. But when you move them into the place where they're trying to run 6 giant greenhouses, all kinds of additional problems show up, and it's much more difficult to do this. So as far as I'm concerned, these giant cannabis companies are still on the starting block. They're still trying to figure it out. And most of them they spend all their money on grow rooms, on flower rooms, and they didn't even think about processing. And as a result, they're having a lot of difficulties because they got it all in the greenhouse, it's coming down, and they're losing a bunch of it because they can't get it processed enough, especially the ones
that can't get it processed.
Set the model hand trimmed. Right. It's when you get that stuff backed up and you can't get it trimmed and packaged and sealed, well, it's either going to get too dry or it's going to get moldy, or all kinds of stuff. So they're learning. There's some smart boys out there doing it. What's interesting is a lot of the top guys in these big companies have never grown marijuana in their life.
Right. Amazing. So, ladies and gentlemen, we've been talking with Ryan Hall from Shearline, who has a phenomenal line of products to help people who are growers, hopefully our listeners, increase their productivity dramatically and produce a high-quality product. And, Ryan, how do people get a hold of you?
Well, the easiest way is just to go to our website, shearline.com, SHEARLINE, one word, .com. And there's a toll-free number there. Scroll through the website, take a look at the how-to videos, and that'll help you out with some questions you may have. Once you look at some of the things, call me up. Call that number, and I'll answer the phone for you. We've been talking to Ryan Hall of Shearline, and Ryan, thank you for joining us today. It was a fascinating conversation, and we'll look to have you back on sometime real soon. Thank you. No, you're very welcome. I enjoyed it. Thank you. We'll be right back. Welcome to the conversation. This is Dan Perkins, and joining us today is Anthony Planas from Banyan Hill Publishing, and he's our expert on investing in cannabis. Thank you for joining us today, Anthony.
Thanks for having me, Dan.
It's been about 12 months since the total deregulation of cannabis sales in Canada, and many corporations are reporting earnings, and they've been very disappointing. Were you surprised?
No, I'm not too surprised. Canada has taken a very measured and what many consider a slow approach to rolling out legalized cannabis, but that's to be expected. They're the first major nation to legalize cannabis on the recreational level, and so all eyes are on them, and so they're trying to make sure that they do it right, and part of doing it right means taking their time.
Do you think they've grown too fast? Are the regulators impacting, or is the market not as big as they thought it was going to be for recreational and medical cannabis in Canada? What do you think caused the disappointment?
I think the market kind of just got too far ahead of themselves with a lot of this stuff. Canada has been pretty firm on setting expectations as far as things were going to take a little bit of time for them to roll out. Ontario is one of probably the most disappointing because they started with such few dispensaries. They took 6 months before they allowed any dispensaries at all, and Ontario is home to nearly half of the Canadian populace. And so I think that was kind of the most disappointing aspect. The rest of the nation has been pretty much on pace with what I would expect. But, I mean, it is going to take some time to introduce legalized cannabis and to get people to move away from the black market product and into the legal supply.
Is the black market a big problem in Canada? Is there an active black market there?
Yeah, there still is. So part of the problem with the black market is that they can undercut the legal prices. Of course, there are safety concerns because these products aren't tested. So the reason that they can undercut prices is they don't have to pay taxes. They don't have to do any kind of special testing. They can use whatever chemicals they want to produce growth rates and all that stuff. And ultimately, all that is a detriment to people's health and safety. It can be contaminated by mold and chemicals and all sorts of things that just people aren't aware of. And so part of it is educating the population on the dangers of the black market and the benefits of the legal product.
The vape controversy. CDC is basically saying now that they believe that most of the problems are the result of black market canisters that were built in an unregulated market and have no idea what was in the canisters. Do you think that's going to be a lesson to the consumer?
Yeah, absolutely. So right now we've seen fears over vaping products affect even the legal market with sales dropping temporarily, and then now that we know the black market sales have kind of plateaued, and so what happens is people realize that there's a threat, and they realize that that threat is from the black market supply, and health and safety is everyone's number one concern. So what ends up happening is that pushes people away from the black market and to the legal and regulated supplies because they know they have peace of mind there. We actually saw the same kind of thing as far as Prohibition-era alcohol, where after Prohibition ended, there were still moonshine and bootleg liquor being sold, but again, it's not being regulated. The producers of this on the illegal market aren't careful, so it can have toxins, it's impure, and it can cause serious health effects. And so the same kind of thing where, the black market is going to persist for a time, but ultimately it will lose because even if it has better prices, safety and health is something that you can't put the price on.
Yeah, and I think that the fact that it's an unfortunate thing to say this, that we had to have some people get very sick and die with the black market product. But we had a situation earlier this week. You may be aware of that. A Michigan court overturned the restriction of the Cannabis Authority about stopping the sale of vaping product because they believe that the physical health issues for people who were suffering from tobacco addiction, that the vaping system was a medical way for them to relieve themselves of that crutch, and it was actually saving lives. So the idea of stopping it, they were saying the number of people affected minimizes the importance of making the product available. So I thought that was now it may be appealed, but it's still a significant situation when the court jumps in and says, wait a minute. So now we have a situation where we're coming up on the end of the third quarter, and in the United States, later this month or early November, we should be beginning to see some earnings from domestic operations. Are you getting any inklings there?
Yeah, I think domestic sales are going to be a little bit lower on the vaping side of things just because of everything that's gone on. So some of that is going to get baked into these quarterly reports. But overall, most of the multi-state operators have really been driving strong sales, stronger than Canada. Part of that is just because state by state, there usually isn't the same kind of regulatory burden that Canada has put on its own consumers. So I think almost definitely we're going to see some hampering of vaping sales, but overall I expect sales to be growing, at least for dried cannabis at the very least.
I saw something today, Anthony, that just blew me away. I saw a Google report of 2 dispensary operators in Florida that are now for sale in the Miami area. And for our listeners, a dispensary license isn't just one building. You could have as many as, in one case, 22 or 23 branches, and the other one was like 28 or 31 branches. One was being offered, I just can't believe this number, one was being offered at $50 million, and the other one was being offered at $45 million. 2 dispensaries in Miami for medical only, $95 million.
Yeah, that's a pretty significant amount of money, but I'm not overly surprised considering the Miami market.
It's a big market. Yeah, Florida is one of the fastest growing, and it's only medical. And there was a recent lawsuit brought that, and I think the court said so, they're going to expand 25 more licenses to bring more dispensaries, physical storefronts, to the people of Florida. So it's already growing by leaps and bounds, one of the fastest in the country. So 25 more licenses could certainly add to it. So I just thought it was $95 million for 2 dispensaries. I just thought it was just amazing. And are you hearing anything about prices going up for dispensaries in other parts of the country?
I look at it more of when these companies are acquiring or selling dispensaries, how much they're selling them for. It's location by location, So Miami is going to be a very different market than Central or North Florida.
Terrific. We've been speaking with Anthony, our money guy. Thank you for joining us today, and tell the people how they can get a hold of you. And we'll have you on our website, too. So how do they get a hold of you, Anthony?
Yeah, banyanhill.com, and you can find all of our editorial content there.
Super. We've been speaking with Anthony Planas from Banyan Hill Publishing, who is our regular money guy. And if you missed part of this show or you missed any of the show today, you can go to our website, W420radionetwork.com, and download previous shows and look for a posting on Anthony how to get in contact with him. Thank you for joining us today on America's Cannabis Conversation.